Welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast with your hosts Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Divert your phone and grab a brew as Waz and Nic unpack tips, tales, secrets and stuff-ups from guests both inside and outside your trade, helping educate and inspire you to break the cycle of gut-busting and money stress and create a true trade business.
G'day, listeners.
Oh, gosh. Hello, everybody.
I may have been out in the sun a bit too long. Coxie, I'm feeling a bit loopy.
Is that what did it, Warwick? It was the sun?
Yes, it was the UV exposure, and my two brain cells got so hot that they bumped into each other and made me a bit crazy.
Causing all the friction in your brain, Warwick.
Yes. Now, speaking of sunshine and photosynthesis...
Good Lord. This is a long bow.
We are ploughing into a great episode today with someone who is probably a bit of a different guest to the Tradies in Business annals, the hallowed halls of the Tradies in Business podcast. Today's guest is a farmer.
And a refreshing farmer indeed. Not just any farmer, a refreshing farmer.
There you go, Charlie. You heard it here, mate. So, listeners, we are talking to a farmer today, but not just any old farmer. And I don't think he's old, but Charlie Arnott, who is a biodynamic beef, lamb, etc. farmer on Byron Bay in New South Wales. Originally grew up in country New South Wales, kind of where you're from, Coxie.
We're very close, actually, like within half an hour from one another, if I think he's in the direction. Yeah.
You actually know how to say the town where he grew up?
No, I don't. So I'm not going to. How about throw me on the spot?
Yeah. So Charlie Arnott is, he actually is a podcaster as well. He has another podcast called The Regenerative Journey. Go check that one out. He is a farmer, but he's doing things differently. He shares his story of making a bunch of mistakes, waking up to new ways, getting himself educated, changing old practices to get better results. I mean, it sounds a bit like a trade business, Coxie.
It does sound like a trade business, isn't it? It's a very refreshing view from outside that you can apply in. I'm really keen to hear what our listeners think of today's episode.
So there's some fantastic lessons here from someone who is, as you say, Coxie, outside the trades, although still very much blue collar. And I think, I don't want to offend anybody. And if you do, well, that's your choice. Farmers and tradies, I think, have a lot in common when you boil it down to working with your hands and disliking time inside in the office doing paperwork. So a lot of great lessons from Charlie. It is a longer one today, so give yourself a bit more time to listen to all of it or do it in a couple of parts. We do talk at the end a bit about some reasonably important issues, I think, Coxie, like, I don't know, the environment.
Just a little bit important.
Food. I think for anybody who eats food, as Charlie says, anybody who eats food here, you'll be interested in this one. Anyone with kids, this is a great episode. And anybody who'd like to change. So you'll hear me fanboy a little bit. I'll probably get a little excited and giggly because I am a Regen Ag fan and I've been listening to Charlie's podcast for a bit. So I hope you get some nuggets dug up out of the soil, or potatoes.
Oh, you're just dropping these. I am so glad that we record these without our guests present, because I'm sure they would sit there and roll their eyes and think, oh my God, what are these two on?
They'll just hang up the call. Sorry, bad line. Bad line, can't hear you. Can't hear you. Sorry, is this thing on? All right, enough waffle from me. Enjoy today's episode, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Enjoy.
Rightio, listeners, we are joined by a bit of a guest with a difference today at Tradies in Business podcast. We're joined by Mr. Charlie Arnott. Charlie, welcome to the show, mate.
Waz, thank you for having me.
And as always, we've got Nicole here. Hi, Nicole.
Hello. How are we all?
Now,
Big chirpies.
Today's guest, I say a guest with a difference because Probably it would be easy to think that, Charlie, you come from outside of trade business land. I've probably always considered the trades to be a blue-collar profession, and I feel like farming, my family has a bit of a farming background as well. I feel like that's very firmly in the blue-collar space. So I probably, I include a lot of them together, but probably is quite different to trade businesses. Can you give us a bit of a brief history of Charlie Arnott so everybody knows who the heck you are, mate, and why we're talking to a beef farmer on the program today?
Yeah. Well, hopefully I can keep everyone's attention over the period of the interview. Talking farming. So I grew up, born and grew up on a family farm at Burrawa. Burrawa is about an hour and a half north of Canberra, New South Wales, and very conventional farming background. I grew up there, mum and dad and my brother, outside every day, mustering, climbing trees, swimming in dams. A wonderful childhood, and went away to school. Did boarding school for 10 years, which was wonderful, and went pearl diving when I left school. Then went to university for a couple of years. Worked in pubs in Sydney for a while, and then went back home to manage the farm. And so I moved back to Burrawa in 1997, I think it was, and took over management there, conventional farming. And when I say that, just for your listeners, I guess my definition of conventional farming or industrial farming is one that really relies on a lot of inputs. You generally create a lot of stuff and produce a lot of stuff, a lot of outputs, but the inputs are significant, excuse me, and in a very, as I say, a very prescribed manner. Like if there's a recipe, we're cropping, and at this time of year we spray this and we do that, and then hopefully you'll get an outcome. So, and also another, I guess, defining point about conventional farming is that you are relying on a lot of other people, a lot of other businesses for your business to work. So because you're buying a lot of stuff, you've got a stock and station agent to sell your animals, you're buying fertiliser, you're buying chemical. It's complex, not necessarily complicated. However, that was normal farming life for me and for most farmers in Australia or around the world. Really is this very interdependent relationship on other people. Now, about 15 years ago, and we were growing beef, lamb, mutton, crops, wheat, barley, oats. We were cutting hay to feed animals, and they were ploughing, a lot of spraying. It was a really busy business. And then about 15 years ago, through a series of courses I did, workshops I did, a few tension events, as we say, I just changed the way I started thinking, decisions I made, my approach to farming, what I was seeing. I was, as I say, I changed the paddock for my ears first. Before I went, oh, that sounds like a good idea, and went outside and started doing something differently. For me, and this may ring true for your listeners, is often there's adversity at those points in your life that you have to change, and there's pain. Humans respond much more to pain than pleasure generally, and I was no different. There was some pain, and then I pivoted. I changed the paddock between my ears, broke some heap of paradigms about farming, and how we've been farming for all those years, and then set sail on a journey into regenerative agriculture, as I say, which is essentially one where we are less reliant on other people, less reliant on external inputs. We work with nature. When I was farming conventionally, I'd wake up every morning and go out and kill something. Might have been a bug, might have been a weed, might have been lice on the back of a sheep, something. For me, it was all about battling nature and trying to master nature in some ways and mine the resources I had. And so the paradigms I broke or new ones I created were And this may be true for some of your listeners too, is that given a lot of them are working in nature and outside and so on, is that I started considering that nature was my most valuable business partner. And you don't treat your business partners badly. And I didn't treat nature well, and I didn't consider it a business partner. And no one's ever won battling nature, ever. But you hear it all the time on the TV and radio, government saying, farmers are battling drought, or battling market prices, or all this talk about battling. It's always associated, I'm finding, with things that are out of our control anyway. Like, it's just why do we do that? So one more little sort of, I guess, facet of what we do now is we focus on what we're in control of, and we try and not get so head up about what's out of our control. So I get that. Look, that's my 5-minute elevator pitch. There was.
Nice, mate. Nice, mate. I'd be pretty keen to buy something off you, mate, based on the elevator pitch.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You don't know,
ready to go.
You don't know what I'm selling now.
You're selling the dream, Charlie. That's what you're selling, mate.
Yeah.
Now,
that's in some ways you're not far wrong. That not so much selling, but what I'm advocating, wherever I can, because I think it's good use of my time, is a different way of farming. It starts with a different way of thinking, and I think that also probably applies to your listeners is, there's lots of tools we can use, but if we don't have the right mindset to use it, or have the experience, or the kind of the right paradigm or the right context for using that tool, then the tool in the hand of an ignorant person or an inexperienced person can be bloody dangerous.
Absolutely, mate. We're seeing that in the world at the moment, Charlie. And mate, it's one of the reasons that I was super keen to get you on the podcast, and I'm just going to come straight out and say a couple of things before Coxie actually drops me in it and steals my thunder.
I would never do that to you.
But my wife and I are both pretty passionate regen ag followers, and that sort of come from our own personal health journey as much as anything else, where really I do come from a farming background a couple of generations ago, and my wife's family are commercial beekeepers, so we sort of have that connection to food and food production. But just through our own personal health, we've really become much more maybe not aware, but probably attuned to food, where it comes from, where it should come from, what's this, the old word is sustainable. And I suppose for our listeners' benefit, I can see a lot of parallels between what you've done, Charlie, and the journey you're on with, I guess, in some ways having to change your headspace in order to change the results you're getting. You talk about doing battle with nature. I feel like our listeners go out and do battle with customers. They do battle with governments and legislative bodies and regulators, and sadly some of them are doing battle with spouses as well, and their kids. And I think it's that I think in regen ag circles anyway, we talk about that sort of reductionist view or extractive way of doing business. So I have a question at the end of that thing. Yes, Coxie, I'm a fanboy. Charlie, there you go, I said it. Love your podcast, mate. And I really do admire people who are putting their money where their mouths are and doing it differently, and willing to teach others and perhaps inspire others to change. So, mate, what were some of those tension events? Like, how the hell did you go from an extractive industry, mining the land, to all of a sudden, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but to changing the way you do things, changing your business model? Like, what were some of your tension events that you talked about?
Good question. So I changed around 2000, just to put a sort of time marker on it, about 2004, we're, a couple of years into the millennial drought. We had a few reprieves from it here and there, but, it was a pretty tough couple of years. And I was really questioning I guess the word I might have been using back then was sustainability of it, the longevity of it, of that kind of management, but also of me. Like I was a bit over it. I was starting to question, why were we sending all our cattle, because we couldn't feed them at Burrawa because we had no grass, because we'd eaten it all. Why are we sending them up to Injune in Queensland to feed them? We had a station up there, so that's where they went. But they went from Burrawa to Tamworth to Injune, and I think they were away for about, 9-12 months. And that for me was normal. When I was a kid, we sent cattle on adjustment. That was what happened. And I just started. It took years for me to actually, as I say, ask myself questions. I wasn't asking myself questions. I wasn't curious enough because I wasn't even happy with the status quo. I was just doing the status quo, And so there was a sort of general slow burn, as it were, of pressure, and just stuff. I was watching paddocks blowing away in the wind. I have very vivid memories of watching, a paddock of ours, a crossbred ewes in there. We were feeding them grain in the soil with this stuff that I knew a bit about. I'd been to uni and learned all about it and stuff, but again, in a very reductionist type of framework, science degree. I saw this stuff that I knew I needed blowing in the wind and got going to New Zealand probably, or down to Tassie or something. And so these things were happening that were, I probably thought out of my control, but probably were really in my control. I mean, the fact we had no grass was because I'd eaten it all, because I left cattle on there to eat it. And then, at the end of the day, if those cattle weren't there, the grass would have stayed and it wouldn't have blown away in the wind. So there were these sort of slow burn, these things happening, and then there was it was tough, emotionally I was starting to question who I was, was I really cut out for this thing, sort of gets you down after a few years of that sort of stuff. So there, and then as a result of being in that sort of a questioning mindset, I was looking just to do something different, just to go, well, where do I put my energy now? How can I sort of start finding some focus again with this farming caper? And I went to a course. This is probably certainly a catalyst for change. The course in Burrawa called Profiting from the Drought. And I looked at that in the paper and went, what a joke. I mean, how do you profit from a drought? So I went along. It was wonderful, changed my life in that I started asking myself better questions. The guy who ran the course said to me at lunchtime, are you happy? And I said, well, I'm not unhappy. But that's a pretty piss poor answer, and I really started questioning, was this a really good use of my time? I was the son of a farmer. Does that mean I had to be a farmer? I loved the landscape I lived in, but it was looking like shit because I was flogging it, but I thought that was normal, this sort of seasonal fluctuation of feed and growth and rain and then no rain. And then really I started, I get back to my previous point about changing paddock between my ears. I started changing paradigms and asking myself questions. I started asking other people questions. I started reading. I went to some workshops. I knew I had to train myself up, and I knew I had to start. I had to start again in a way, I thought, And I went cold turkey, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone. And when I say cold turkey, I was doing a course, and halfway through, it's a week-long course. I rang the boys at the farm, and I said, I gave them some orders, and essentially they were, tasks that were I'd learnt that day, the day before. Put some mobs together. Didn't cost me, I think, just some changes in approach. One thing I went cold turkey is I stopped spraying chemical, and I'd met my wife, or my to-be wife, around the same time, and she was eating organic before there were organic shops. She was just that way inclined, and that's not for me, thankfully. It could be. And so, so putting it in the context of like my own personal health and my family, that was a whole different thing. I never thought really about chemical that I was spraying all over the paddocks on cattle on weeds, on the soil could do me any harm. And I suddenly thought, shit, this, maybe it's going to do me some harm. I wasn't stirring things with my arm like people probably used to do, but I wasn't wearing protective gear. I was thinking, they wouldn't sell the stuff that was dangerous. They probably
slightly
did
naive, mate.
Oh, totally. But really, it was like there weren't really many rules and regulations around it back then. You didn't have to. Now you need a chem cert to handle this stuff, and you go and do a course.
Yeah.
There was no such thing back then. So, I guess I hope I'm getting to the answering your question. There was, but I mean there were many things. Some were over a long period of time. Some were immediate. Some were a second where things happened, and thank God they did, because I don't know what I'd be doing now. I'd probably be not as healthy. I'd be. I mean, who knows? I started to think, what would have happened if I hadn't changed. Maybe I would have been okay. I don't know, but I certainly am grateful that for whatever reason, obstacles were put in my way that I had to get around or get over or go through, that then pushed me to make some decisions and think differently.
Mm.
Charlie, I'm intrigued to know, when we change the way we think, it seems to bring up a lot of objections from those around us. And knowing a little about farming families and farming communities, I can imagine some of that objection that you would have fallen into. And I'd love to hear how you tackled that objection, because your ideas are not traditional. They're very different. They're not easily embraced by those people that continue to do the same as they've always been taught. And it can feel quite threatening to the people around us. So I'm really keen to hear how you dealt with that when it did come up for you.
Good question. So I guess I'll just sort of start by saying what I do differently now. What I'm doing is different to what I used to do, and I don't want to give anyone the impression that what people are doing now that I used to do is wrong. It's more, I'm just glad I'm not doing that anymore, and I like to talk to people and encourage people to look at things differently. Whether they choose to do that is another thing. And as you just said, there's lots of barriers potentially for people to change the way they think. And as you say, some of them are internal. Well, some of them are external in that they're family members, external to oneself, and it's dad. I mean, that was a big thing for me was, if I change what I'm doing, which is what dad used to do, is that making dad wrong? Mm. And then he is amazing for many reasons, but one is that he really supported me in what I did. He actually started coming to some of the conferences I was going to, and he joined the sort of these business boards things that I'd take him to these conferences, and we'd talk about them, and he'd sit in on these things, and he'd get to know the people I was hanging out with, and joining those conversations, and he was getting more and more comfortable with what I was doing. He didn't have to do that, He could have dug his heels in. So I'm very grateful for that. And there's lots of families I know where the older generation made it very hard because, the fear of change, their sons or daughters lost the plot, how do they expect to run a business in this new crazy way? Lots of different paradigms. But I was lucky. So that was good. I guess internally I was worried about what people were going to think and how that was going to play out socially and culturally. Having said that, generally, I don't know, I probably didn't do many things by the book historically, in my life doing what I did. My background was pretty conventional, but I guess my behaviour and the way I approached things wasn't. So this was, again, a reflection of just a maturity in being a farmer and changing and I guess, getting over myself and thinking, well, if I don't do it, I don't make these decisions, and if I don't follow my intuition, which is another thing that I've got much better at doing. I'm by no means an expert, but it's something that farmers have lost, I think, is following their intuition. if I didn't listen to myself and my feelings, God forbid farmers have feelings, by the way. So, if I didn't do that, I knew that was going to be not a good thing. I knew to keep going the way I was going was not going to be good. In terms of the community, I mean, look, people always thought I was a bit of a kook anyway, I think. So that didn't change too much. Yeah, in a way, I wasn't like, I mean, I was doing things very conventionally, but at the same, in terms of the farming practices, but I guess how I was doing it and might have been a little different. But yeah, that is the biggest hurdle. It's changing those paradigms. It's breaking down the societal norms, because it isn't normal to be doing this sort of farming that I'm doing. At the end of the day, it's about doing what you think is the right thing to do. To find your purpose, to express yourself. As farmers, we have a wonderful opportunity to express our creativity in the landscape, and within our business, with our animals and our trees and our pastures and whatever. That's not something farmers don't consider themselves artists or creative people. I mean, they might create a crop, as it were, but in terms of the partnering with nature to create something that's beautiful, that's not something we really think about. I didn't anyway. But then, I knew that changing my mind, I come from a pretty creative, artistic family, but I wasn't really being creative. And I knew this new way of farming was going to afford me the opportunity to really express myself much better, And here I am talking to you guys 15 years later on a podcast. That was not nowhere near. I mean, I probably didn't have podcasts back then anyway. But my point is, it's led me to so many wonderful things off farm as well as on. And I think I'll finish that one, Nicole, by saying, if you don't have a few enemies, you're not having a go.
I totally agree.
And that's not. I'm not suggesting people should go out and do that on purpose. But for some time I was. And I am, in some ways, still a bit of a pleaser. I don't like upsetting people, especially ones close to me. But at the end of the day, I can't be responsible for people's emotions. And I'm getting better at just saying it as it is, and following my intuition. And you're not going to make everyone happy all the time. And again, it's not to say you push back on purpose, but sometimes your actions are going to upset people, and you got a choice. Every second of the day, you got a choice as to how you behave and what your actions are. But you don't have a choice as to how people will respond.
I agree. I'm also interested to know where you found the courage to take the first step. Because I feel with our tradies quite often they've done some self-education, they're ready to take a step to do things a little bit differently, but they are finding it hard to find the courage to take that first step in a different direction. Where did that come from for you?
Good one. I guess I went cold turkey, as I said, and when I say that, I stopped chemical use and did some pretty hardcore changes immediately, within days, within weeks. That's the kind of guy I was, and because I guess, and I wouldn't suggest anyone do that. And in your world, I would suggest take baby steps. If it's from a financial point of view and it's about committing funds to a different way of doing things. In farming, say, and the easiest way for me to put this is, if you're spending, I'm saying $100 a hectare, area of land on inputs, cropping, whatever, carve off $10, 10% of that, and do it differently. 20% if you're feeling a bit crazy, but just step into it lightly. Don't blow the bank. Don't change your budget, as it were, but just change the allocation of that. It's a very sort of simple financial way to look at it. And that's not too hard. That's not like throwing away everything you've learned and just hoping for the best. That's just a nice measured way to do it. And then, depending on the results, then you can put 30% away next year or whatever, incrementally, and you work on that. I guess I've lost my train of thought there now. The change. I think finding a mentor, someone else in your business, in your industry who has done it. It's a Tony Robbins thing to say, but I love it. Is that don't you don't have to make the same mistakes everyone else has made. If you find those people who've made the mistakes, they've learnt and they've changed their way and they're identified as being leaders in your space, heading in the direction you want to go, follow in their footsteps and just literally get on board. Talking about courage, email them, ask them, sort of identify, because they've been where you are now. They've been there before, and anyone worth following is going to want to at least give you some time of day and give you a bit of a hand. So I mean, there's actually, and then they've got some wonderful mentors that I ring often, and it's a sounding board, and it's good for them too, because they're generally a bit older than me, and they like giving back. As we get older in life, I'm finding I want to give back more, and these people do. So you might be really surprised at how many people are willing to help you if you just ask them for help. And if they say no, they say no. That's fine. Move on to someone else. There's so many resources out there that we can, jump into, Google and books and so on. And I mean, I think that's just having the courage to. It's really hard to unknow these things. If you go to a course like I did, and I spoke to farmers who were doing this new way of farming, I saw the stats. There's a fair bit of science around this sort of stuff, and even just in terms of like chemical use, like I couldn't go backwards. I couldn't unknow or unhear what I'd heard, and for me, there was also a bit of guilt attached to my changes as well, because I've been spraying the crap out of food for years and probably poisoning people, to put it bluntly. I was not at all contributing to people's health, I don't think. So, there was some guilt in me going, you know what, it's actually, I think I've got a responsibility to change here, So that may also be a motivation for people to change. Just be, whether it's because of their family, financial situation, health of their kids, I don't know. You were talking, was there earlier about food and sort of the changes people make to their diet, whether it's a health event has pushed them in that direction. But once you learn about human health and its connection with food and mental health and then farming and where your food's from, it's a pretty compelling reason to change how you eat and how you behave and how you live.
Charlie, would you say farming is a business?
Is a business? That's a good question. One I've never been asked before was. It is. I mean, it is a business. It's the that's the context of the business. The content is really up to you. What you do within the context of that business. Now, we use holistic farm management sort of principles in ours, and we look at the whole. We don't look at doing one thing and expecting it to sort of not impact other areas of it. Our business, we like to think, works a bit like nature works, in that everything is connected, and you can't remove something from nature or remove something from a business or change something in a business and it not sort of have some knock-on effect, some hopefully positive impact on it. So it is a business, because as much as I enjoy it, we've still, we've still got to survive, and we've still got to justify being there, and we've still, it's not a hobby. It's a purpose. It's a real purpose.
The reason I asked that question. Sorry.
You go.
The reason I asked that question, and surprisingly, we've got some internet lag today. Well, I do. I don't know if that's just because it's got to travel all the way up there from Tassie, but I see a lot of parallels between farming and our trade-based business owner listeners. A lot of people get into the trades because they're either good with their hands or they suck at the other stuff, and so they choose the work with the hands anyway. And it's generational for a lot of our tradies. Their dad was a plasterer or a builder or a plumber or something to do with that, and so they just naturally follow that, which is pretty, that's pretty typical, I think, of that intergenerational transfer of vocation. And a lot of them do it because they enjoy working with their hands and they hate the other stuff. They hate all the stuff you've been talking about, which is, understanding the inputs and all the moving parts and working on the paddock between their ears. And I guess it was one of the other reasons that I was pretty keen to talk to you on the podcast, because sometimes I find it really helpful to look outside of the trades at what's going on in other industries for lessons there. And I wanted to ask about the resistance you see from other farmers who maybe recognise that there could be a better way, but they just can't get over that hump. They just can't push the wagon over the speed bump. Do you come across that, mate? And what part do you play in actually helping some of those primary producers to make the changes?
We'll get just sort of backtracking there. There are a lot of similarities in farming and in the trades. I mean, one is that farmers pretty much are half-assed tradies themselves in everything. They've got to be plumbers, they've got to be electricians, they've got to be vets, they've got to be bloody doctors, they've got to be landscape architect in some. There's so many. Got to be. They're chippies. They're everything in a little bit. So we love working with our hands, and yes, the intergenerational vocation. That's a very big thing in farming. A lot of farmers that I know who've done courses that I've done actually got to the end of them and said, actually, I don't want to be a farmer anymore, because they got clear on their visions and their goals and their purpose. So it's an interesting, and a lot of people say, that bloody course he did, he went bust. He's not a farmer anymore. I said, yeah, well, he actually worked out he didn't want to be a farmer, which is a really good thing. So he changed. They changed. They changed what they did. In terms of how I help. Well, I'll back another step. Like any business, you almost need three people in each business, because you've got the creative people, you've got the hands-on farmers. They like putting up a fence or drenching sheep or something. You've got that side. You've got then you've sort of got they're the creative, often the creative side. Then you've got the financial sort of person who's doing the numbers, and farmers generally don't like seeing screens and doing all that stuff, doing budgets and that sort of stuff too. So, and then you've got sort of more operational administration type work, and a lot of those sort of overlap as well. But for one individual, whether they're a tradie or a farmer, to be good at all those things, like, can someone find me one of those people? Because I'm not one of them, and that's, I think, the pressure we often put on ourselves to be. And being honest and having the courage to say, I need help, and can someone else do my books for me, or can, someone else look after the governance or the administration or the compliance or whatever. It's a really smart thing to do. Playing to your strengths, I think, is a really good general policy. So back to your question, was about how I help people with that transition or to think differently. I mean, I guess I asked them to better questions, as I said before. I asked them, are they happy? I asked them, could you be doing things differently? Are you happy with the results you're currently getting? It's a pretty easy and absolutely cheap way to just to ask people questions that they've probably never been asked before. Like, I'm sure a lot of your tradies the listeners are, as you say, probably dad was a chippy or a sparky or something. I've done it. Well, I know that's fine. I'm good at it, But then to ask some simple questions about, do they have a bigger picture vision for their life? Are they really truly happy in doing what they're doing? Are they playing to their strengths? Are they geographically where they want to be? Are they having enough family time and going on holidays? I mean, just some simple questions can really prompt and provoke some questions and some questioning, which I think is really healthy. It can be very confronting, and it can be, and sometimes the answers aren't going to be pretty. But having the cojones to actually ask yourself those questions and be honest with yourself, I don't think we often aren't. Back to your question there, Nicole, about the sort of social pressure or the fear of change, and we sort of go, oh man, if I answer that question, I know what it's going to be. That means I've got to do something else now. I've got to be accountable for that, and that can be really difficult. So, I mean, really, I'm no expert in anything. I have to be clear about that. I'm good at a few things. What I think I'm good at is sort of highlighting to people that there is a different way to do things. In this case, it's farming, and encouraging them, giving them some resources, asking them a few questions to go away and do their own homework. And if they don't change, that's absolutely fine, because they'll have their own reasons for not changing or not thinking differently. And again, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm right. If you don't change, you're a muppet. It's like, man, I am where. I think one thing that I'm comfortable, why I'm comfortable doing what I do, one of the things I do, I've been where they are. I've been spraying chemical on everything. I've been waking up every morning killing stuff. I've been at the coalface of that. In my context of Boorowa, I'm not a big, cattle farmer from the Kimberleys or anything, but in my context, I've got a bit of an idea, and not being anyone's enemy about it either, I think, and sort of being compassionate about where they are, where they've been, and where they might be able to go. Not sure if I even answered your question there.
I think you did.
Because you know what? Can I just say one thing on the back of that? Sounds like a silly thing to say, but I mean, regenerative ag as a general thing is not prescriptive. There is no recipe. There is no, this is the way you step from where you are to where you're going. And it's the same with your listeners. They might be doing one thing in a particular way. You've got to, if you think about changing and you think you know where you want to go and you might have some of the tools on the way, I'd be cautioning people, don't just adopt things, adapt them. Adapt them to your business, adapt them to your vision, adapt them to your family's motivations and values. Thinking that, mate, other chippy or something is doing it a particular way, that's what I should do. It's like, man, that's probably worse than what you're currently doing if you think you need to change, because it works for him. He's adapted it to his situation, So it's about taking on the principles and applying them in a way that feels good. And then in that way, you can do it. You can do it a little bit every time. If you just get a recipe for what to do, you're going to be going too fast, too slow, wrong things. You're going to make more mistakes. And on that one, mistakes are good. They're only a mistake if you do it twice. And that's the best way to learn. And that's, I've royally screwed a whole lot of things up. Still do. And that's okay. I'm comfortable doing it.
You made a point very early on in the podcast when you were just sharing your story with us, Charlie, about focusing on what you're in control of, which I think is probably the biggest nugget you've given us so far, and we let it slide at the time. It's something that I don't feel many of us do very well. We're so busy worrying about what we actually have no control of, and we're missing the bits that of what we can do to influence change or influence a better outcome. How did you change that mindset for yourself? Because that's not an easy lesson to take on board and then change the way we think to understand, okay, I've only got control of X, Y, Z. That is what I'm going to work on, instead of trying to influence whether it's going to rain or shine tomorrow, which is impossible.
Good one. Like in the context of farming, it's a good example of that, and you just referenced rain, is I used to worry about the rain. When's it going to rain? Check the bloody weather all the time. And just focus on that, totally out of my control. And I wasn't thinking about, if it did rain, or when it did rain, how am I going to use it? I wasn't focusing on the right thing. So, and I saw it in the last, February, a lot of rain fell, farmers crying for rain, the rain landed and it went sideways. It took soil, water, gone, down the paddock. Crying shame, a real tragedy. And so given the way, I guess, we're thinking and changing how we do things, we're focusing on what we are in control of. In this case, if I want that rain to stay where it lands and use it, because that's ultimately one of the nice things about rain, use it to grow stuff. I want it to stay where it lands. So I retain ground cover, grass. And how do I do that? Well, I sell my animals before, they eat all that grass, and there's a whole sort of a knock-on effect to that. So focusing on what I'm in control of how I graze my land. I'm not in control of the rain that falls on. It's pretty simple sort of stuff, really. But it took me years to work it out, and it's a big paradigm to break. I think one thing that was often the things we focus on we don't want are out of our control. A lot of the things we do want is in our control. So I just focus on what I want. And in the case of farming, I want diverse species in my pasture, my grass, or my cattle to eat so they're healthy and they've got a good diet. If I focus on the weeds, or so-called weeds, then it's funny where your focus goes. What is it? Where energy goes? What's that expression?
Where attention goes, energy flows.
Yeah, that's it. Well done. So if I'm focusing,
I feel accomplished.
No,
now,
that's
Charlie.
it. Yeah, no, good. There's the nugget. Right there. If you're focused on the weeds and going, oh bloody weeds, you're putting energy in it, you're putting money into it, you're putting time. They're going to stay there because that's the only thing you're going to see. You're not going to be looking at the stuff you want. So that's we don't pretend they're not there. We just don't look at them. I don't worry about them. I put that to one side and I focus on what I want and what you want. Well, be really clear on what you want in any business. Being clear on your big picture goals, whether it's a 5-year, 10-year, 1-year goal. You're focusing on what you want. The stuff that you might normally worry about or might come in from the side, magically doesn't happen as often because you're just not putting the energy into it. Again, Nicole, it's about breaking paradigms and questioning, the old behaviours about and the old behaviours of focusing on what you're not in control of. And I tell you what, it's such a relief when you stop doing that, because you think about it, really, I'm worrying about something that I can't control. Like if you took that out of the farming context or trading context or whatever, and you just said that, and people are going to go, yeah, you're nuts. Like but it's okay to do it in farming. It's okay to do it in trading. Why do we just do that?
Yeah.
And it's because we're in a paradigm. We're in a sort of a loop of doing the same old thing, and it's exactly what we're talking about. It's about like throwing a spanner in there and going, I'm going to get out of this loop. I've got to break this pattern. And that's another thing about regenerative agriculture is we often talk about breaking patterns, even the patterns of grazing. Nature doesn't work. Nature works in patterns, but it's not like a structured recipe of seasonality or rainfall or anything, So breaking the way we do things and questioning what we do, instead of sending, your invoices out the same time every month, question, why am I even doing that? Because Dad did. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I shouldn't be giving them, 6-week terms. I should be giving them 2 weeks because, just those sort of things about really thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Love it. Charlie, you've talked a bit about your journey so far and the old ways of farming, and I guess the fact that you did change. Something you haven't shared yet is, and perhaps this is a way to sort of give a quick little education on regen ag and what it actually means, but what does farming look like for you now, and what does life look like for you now that you have actually made a lot of those changes, gone cold turkey, changed the paddock between the years, mate? Like, give us the contrast and the clarity. Okay, well, the one big one is the chemical use. I'm not spending hours, burning around in a spray rig spraying crap out of everything. That's I'm not getting exposed to chemical. That's pretty straightforward. That goes hand in hand with what we eat. We're growing a lot more of our food. A lot more of our food. I wouldn't have eaten the stuff that we were there's no way I'd make a loaf of bread out of the wheat we used to grow. We don't grow wheat anymore. If we did, it'd be organic essentially, and I'd be very happy I'd be proud of,
to do that. We're growing more food ourselves, veggies. We've always done home kills. That hasn't changed, but now I know I can eat my lamb without knowing, didn't have ivermectin in it 3 weeks ago. So there's a sort of a internal, health side of it, physical health. I guess from a mental health point of view, I'm much more relaxed. I'm probably not doing, I shouldn't say I'm not doing as much. It's not as complex. I don't have multiple enterprises trying to sort of be, dependent of each other. And whilst nature there's an interdependency of everything on a holistically managed farm, and a biodynamic farm, which ours is, you're not trying to lay all these enterprises just to make money, based on an economic relationship with the landscape. And now I'm just the virtue of the fact we're not putting as much inputs. I'm not spending the time and the money on fertiliser and this. We're making our own. So from a stress point of view, I'm much happier. And I guess from the third part of it is it's from a spiritual point of view, which is a reasonably ambiguous sort of a word. It means lots of things to many people. But for me, having a relationship with my landscape and with nature and the things on it, the plants, the animals, the soil, the people, that for me is very grounding, and that is it's a very nurturing. It's a sense that I'm responsible for nurturing this landscape and it's nurturing me, and that feels really good. Because I have a relationship with it. It's not just a resource there anymore to extract from and mine. And it's not just like part of the equation getting to the answer of a product, I grow food now. Before I used to grow commodities. I used to grow stuff to sell to some old mate at the markets. I didn't care where it went as long as he paid me. Now I'm actually, I consider I have a responsibility to grow food that's going to nurture people and nourish people, not poison them. So in the context of your listeners, instead of, you're not just, might sound weird, but instead of bashing in a bathroom and making someone, it's like it's a bathroom. It's like that's where people get clean. That's where people nurture themselves. That's a really important part of a house, as an example. And having the reverence for their job and what they're doing, that you're going to contribute significantly to this family's life, as an example, or a kitchen or an appliance or something. I mean, this is it's going beyond it just being a job and a chore to it being a really purposeful, for me, feeling like a really purposeful thing you're doing. And the wonderful thing, again, I get to work with nature, in nature, and that's, as I said, it feels really good, and I'm very respectful of it, because it's ever present, it's powerful, it's not going away. I'm never going to beat it. I might as well not even think about trying. You just work with it, and it's amazing what it gives back. Instead of having to take from it, it'll give to you anyway. If you get out of a transactional type of mindset and you think about just giving, because it will give back.
So, mates, you still run a commercial enterprise though, Charlie?
Yeah, we sell. We've got cattle, sheep. We're running pigs now. We sort of got into them 10 years ago. We eat all of that ourselves. They're our main products. We also teach other farmers biodynamics, and we make our own biodynamic preparations, soil preparations and atmospheric preparations, which essentially have replaced our old conventional fertiliser regime. And that in itself has been wonderful, because we are actually using the resources on our land, essentially cow shit, a lot of it is, and some rocks and minerals to create the fertility and enhance the fertility and cycle of fertility that's already there. So, so we're protein producers, I guess you might say. We are doing some cropping as well to not to eat, not as an end product for humans to eat, but more for cattle and sheep to eat, and using that as a tool to. It's a bit experimental at the moment to change the biology in the soil to then grow better grass and produce better, lamb and pork and beef. So Yeah, no, we're definitely producing stuff. That's what we're doing. So we're still, we're producing food. I think that's essentially what farmers are built to do.
And the reason I ask that, mate, is I guess for our listeners, a lot of them are trying to do things differently, in their way, I suppose, better, in an industry that's still doing things very much the way they were always done, and they're coming up against a lot of competitors who are perhaps not using, full safety equipment or providing as quality an install on the bathroom, for example. And so it's hard to compete out in that marketplace when you've got the incumbent, well-accepted paradigm. And then, we've got a listener who's got a plumbing business or a landscaping business or whatever, who are trying to do something from a place of service and quality and those sorts of aspects that they're all chasing. How have you found that with your enterprise, essentially being up against some of the old school styles of production, and perhaps with the the price advantages that creates?
Yeah. So what I guess the short answer there is we sell the sizzle, not just the sausage. Everyone's got a story. Again, a tradie can go out and just install something and build something and do something. Absolutely do that, and you won't be much different from the next bloke. But if you can tell the story, share your experience, get on, make social media more of a part of your business, be transparent, be authentic, give people, sell the sizzle, sell what you're doing, and then that will be a point of difference. You can identify the quality of your work, you can identify your personality. And people, some people just want someone to come in and fix something, but they're going to engage with them at some point. There's going to be some rapport. There's going to be something else that needs fixed. I mean, people would rather choose someone they like than some muppet who's just going to do a job. So if you identify that you are open, you're honest, you're transparent, you're authentic. And the way to do that is, again, social media. I do a fair bit of it. And yes, it can be a tad time-consuming, but there is that layer of, I guess, that authenticity. I have no social media strategy at all. I'd love someone to help me put one together. No, seriously. I'm just looking at something, taking a photo, or looking at dung beetles eating shit, and go, that's cool, and I take a video of it. That works, and it's worked for me to this point because I guess I'm saying it's authentic because it's spontaneous, and that's fine. So, someone who might think that installing a bathroom is quite boring, man, inject a bit of personality into it. Or someone on your team, it may not necessarily be you, get the young bloody apprentice who's, pretty funny or something, and just, they can be your person on social media, but they still represent your business. Gives them something to, look forward to, because it's a little additional thing on their little job description there. And create that point of difference. I mean, I'm not familiar with sort of how much social media goes on in the tradie world. It would, like farming, seem like one more bloody thing to think about. But
bang on, mate.
But you know what? I mean, I'm a farmer. I get around doing lots of other things. But who doesn't have a phone in their pocket with a camera on it? No one. It's in your hand every 5 minutes. Just snap away. If it doesn't look good, and don't use it, or experiment. I mean, no one's going to. Your mates might have a go at you for being really. You know what? I reckon they'll have a go at you because they're going, "Oh, I wish I was that courageous to do that."
That's exactly right. Yeah,
of course they are.
So,
I think what you're actually talking there to, Charlie, is passion and sharing your passion. And when you share your passion, people connect with your story. And that's what creates interest and makes you stand out from the 5 other competitors that come before you that might have a cheaper price or a different structure. When you're sharing your passion, people buy into that and that story and the connection they have with you. And that's what all this is really about, isn't it? It's about the connection that you have, the connection with the land, the connection to the purpose of why you're doing the work in the first place, the connection to the product that you produce in the end. And sharing that connection with your clients in the tradie world is also very much part of that story.
Absolutely. And I think, if there is no longer that spark, if you don't have that passion, then you've got to start asking yourself, why are you doing it? If this if this interview or your other interviews and or anything that precipitates better questions being asked, especially ones that involve your life and your purpose, and you can't come up with answers that you like the sound of, man, that's okay. Better to do it now than when you're retiring and go, oh, I wasted my whole working life doing something I didn't like doing. Mm. It's it can be challenging to change, but I think people's lives are too valuable to not consider and not ask themselves those questions and not find the purpose. And not everyone finds. I mean, it's not as though, oh yes, I found my purpose. I'm now a complete human. It's just at least you're on that journey. You're not complacent. I mean, who wants to be domestic and complacent and comfortable all the time? Mm. I mean, that'll send you to a grave. quicker than anything else, So
plenty of companies selling that out in the marketplace. We're seeing the results of that these days. The old avoid discomfort at all costs. So much of life is set up to get us to believe that there should be no discomfort, there should be no challenge, there should be no adversity in life, and I think that's where a lot of people get disillusioned and probably lose hope, is because they're seeing challenge and adversity and struggle, and that's actually where the good shit comes from. So
totally. Just on that one was, I mean, your listeners may be familiar with the Stoic sort of philosophy and principles, and as you well clearly know, that's what it's about. It's accepting that, look, life isn't all beer and skittles. If you don't strengthen the muscle, the muscle between your ears, the muscles in your body, the muscle, your heart muscle, your gut muscle when it comes to food, you got to prepare for adversity, because it'll come around the corner before you know it. And one of my favourite quotes is, success is the confluence of preparation and opportunity. And if we're preparing and we're thinking about it, and we're, people don't know about the Stoic philosophies, just Google it. There's a heap of stuff there. Because opportunity abounds, but you'll only be able to take advantage of it or utilise that opportunity if you are prepared in some way.
Love it.
Charlie, I feel like this is an opportunity for me to ask a couple of final questions before we let you go and answer that ringing phone, mate.
No, I'll shut the door. I'll pretend it's not happening.
It's the orders rolling in, mate. Someone wants to buy some more cow shit. Mate, this is a new one that I've been asking a few people on the show, and that is, you could sort of pick an age here, but if you could meet a younger Charlie Arnott, 18, 20-year-old version of yourself, if you could go back in time and meet yourself at a younger age, at that pivotal age, what advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Don't give a shit about what other people think.
Bang, mate! You didn't even have to think about that.
No, because I live every day thinking about that, because there's been many decisions made, many opportunities wasted, many things. It's if I had to nominate a character flaw, it's that. For me, it's been not speaking my truth. That for lots of reasons I didn't. Not wanting to offend people, not wanting to, just have conflict, pleasing. That's been a real. I can source many things back to that character trait, and I'm getting better at it. But that's what I would say to my straight out of school, straight out of uni. Speak your truth, and you will. That's the most surest footing that anyone can ever have. No one can ever take that away from you.
Great response, mate. The other question, which probably seems a bit trite, and I need to figure out a way for us to talk about Regen Ag at some point, perhaps in part 2 of the podcast, which I know you'll want to do on your show, mate. But a question I've been asking for years of guests now is, if you had 1,000 tradies in a room, trade business owners, what's some advice you'd actually give them, mate? Potentially the same as the young Charlie Arnott, but what's one piece of advice you'd like to tell them, mate?
Oh, well, probably, I don't know. I've probably covered most of it already. That's a great idea. Great question. I'd probably say something like, I don't know, get to know yourself better. Because often we just get busy, we get distracted, we think we know what we're supposed to be doing. You know, there's expectations on us to do or be or have and all that sort of stuff. I think, and that's another thing, you know, this whole, you know, have, do, be. You know, we think we have to have something to then be able to do something, and then that makes us, we can be the person we want to be. But, you know, it's all us about. We've really got to be who we feel we need to be. That's the primary thing. So getting to know yourself and, you know, understanding yourself better. Now, that can be done in so many different ways, of course. But I think, especially for men, you know, and farming men, like I was reading a yarn to someone the other day, and, you know, saying the word self-love and farming in the same sentence is like, does that ever happen in the world? You know, so all your mates go, oh, self-love, you know, what's that mean? Or they'll crack funnies about it. But really, at the end of the day, and my wife still badgers me about it, which I'm glad she does, just being kind to yourself, you know. Be kind to your future self. And that could be from a mental point of view, physical, you know, the food you eat, the job you're doing, you know, because that's, you know, you're accountable to yourself, and you'll be accountable to yourself when you retire, and you want to be happy with what you've done with your life. So getting to know the person that is you in your life, I think that's really important. And that I'm happy to say that because it applies to anything: farming, tradies, any vocation, any individual.
Well, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. I know we didn't specifically talk about Regen Ag, and so...
that's all boring.
It's just about dirt and rain and food and stuff. Nothing important, it's just food. Mate, if people do want to find out more about it, and look, my personal belief is that we could all do with a healthy dose of education around our food and our food systems. And look, if nothing else comes out of the shenanigans with COVID, I think a lot of people have realised how fragile our food systems and our supply networks actually are. Where's some good places for people to go to find out more about regenerative agriculture and why it could actually be really important for all of us?
Oh, there's a whole podcast series just there.
Well, we can do that as a side project, mate. Just quickly, I mean, going to farmers markets and talking to the farmers who are growing your food, I think that's really important. And if you don't do it for you, do it for your kids and your spouse or whatever. I think, you know, that's important. I mean, there's a connection between regenerative agriculture, food, and saving the planet. As a friend of mine, Chris Miliota, says, you know, the answer to the world's problems are what we choose to eat and what's beneath our feet. And if people can start understanding the connection between soil health, the quality of food, the nutritional density of food, their health, going off in one direction, and then also soil quality, you know, its ability to sequester carbon and essentially, you know, mitigate climate change and that sort of thing. I mean, this is a pretty significant thing that we're talking about. I encourage everyone to think a bit more about it, you know, getting just back to food. Just finding out where it's from. Ask better questions. Go to your butcher and say, is this grain-fed or grass-fed? I'm
absolute advocate of grass-fed beef. It's a much more natural way to produce beef, not grain. Don't get confused between the two. Say, has this animal been fed grass all its life and no other grain? That's the animal you want. That's one question you can ask your butcher. Going to a grocery store and asking, how fresh is it? Eating stuff that's not got chemicals sprayed on it. I mean, I can say this because I used to do it. God knows how much poisoning I've done in my day. You don't want to eat food with chemical on it. I mean, this whole COVID thing, look up epigenetics. The way that chemicals in our food is changing the expression of our genes. I mean, this is mind-boggling stuff. And, that is probably one of the most significant things people could do. Okay, still eat tomatoes, still eat bananas. Like, don't change your diet, just change where you're getting it from. Even if you don't ask where it's from, just make sure hasn't got chemical on it. That is probably the biggest thing I can say to people. It'll change so many things. You won't be having so much toxicity in your body. That's significant. And if you're supporting growers who are doing that, you're supporting them to improve the environment for your kids. Like, think of it that way, leave a legacy through what you eat. Vote with your fork. I reckon, if people just do a few of those simple things, without sounding cliche or corny, you're going to change the world, literally, And you can be part of that, and you can be proud of that.
Cool, mate. And your website is charliearnott.com.au, is that?
That's it. It's under construction. We've got links to the podcast there. And we are putting a new one together where people, your listeners, don't have to be a farmer to use it. We've got a section for farmers and all the different sort of couple of types of farmers, and they can find sort of answers to questions and go on their own regenerative journey. My podcast is called The Regenerative Journey. We've got a section for chefs and retailers and where they can go to find food and sort of learn up on regenerative farming. And then the other section, probably the biggest section really, is eaters, So those who, like, when I want to go to a conference and I start by saying, put your hand up if you eat food. Listen up, you're in the right spot. So we have a section for them where it's about wellness, it's about meditation, it's about, there'll be some subtle energy stuff there. There'll be, nutrition, about environment, so that people can get on and go, well, I'm not a farmer, but this bloke looks interesting. Oh, shit, wow, meditation, probably not a bad thing to think about. Or, Pilates, or it might be, we don't run Pilates classes, but we have people who we really love and support who do. And, nutrition is like, how can you support the environment? Oh, join a land care group and help plant trees. Simple stuff, like having a keep cup, like, great, that's lovely, but let's get some on-ground stuff. Let's make some significant change by joining a land care group and going to Burrawa and helping plant trees for superb parrots. That's great. That's what we want people to do. And again, if you don't do it for you, do it for your kids. Take your kids to Burrawa and plant trees because they'll love it.
Well, mates, I reckon I should probably pull us up there. Otherwise, we're going to hit the 2-hour mark. Which would be great for us, but the listeners probably want to have an end to it. So, mate, thank you again for your time today, Charlie. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and look, I love the parallels between a big industry here in Australia in farming and primary production, and the parallels between that and the trades. There is so much to learn from people like you outside of the trade industries. Go check Charlie out and the work that he's doing in the Land Care Group. There's so much we haven't talked about today. Check out Charlie's podcast called The Regenerative Journey. He has some great guests on there as well. And above all, I think educate yourselves about changing the paddock between your ears. I love it, mate.
Good one. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks, Waz. Really appreciate the fact that you've had a farmer on your show. I think that says a lot about what you guys are doing, that it's not just about the siloed sort of approach to your industry. We've all got so much to learn from each other, and a lot of the principles of business and life apply across the board. So, I hope listeners can take a bit of something home between their ears after they listen to this.
And not just weeds. Thanks heaps, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. It's been a pleasure.
Guys. Good one.
You've been listening to the Tradies in Business podcast with Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Find out more about today's guest, tools for your trade business, and other cool stuff at tradiesandbusiness.com.au.